Hey everybody, this is Erath with SoCal GG, and I wanted to do a quick video on expansion and what it means to have a good expansion and how that could impact your game. Expansion is one of my favorite topics to cover and probably one of my favorite things to test. So that being said, I want to start out with kind of one of the big points of it, and that's 20 by 12 and what that means. 20 by 12 is the concept that's going to help you understand what a good expansion target is for a regular multiplayer game. Of course, this could depend on the settings that you've chosen, whether it's 15 provinces per player or 20 provinces per player, etc. I'm assuming around that range. So I'm going to show you how to prepare to do expansion testing and how to get the hang of what to look for, and what are some good metrics I think to use to be able to perform well in a multiplayer lobby. So starting that out, there's some mods that I do like to use for this. One in particular that helps when you want to start testing multiple nations at once is the One Age mod. I like to use it because it allows you to create a nation for any age in the same game. So if you want to test something from EA, MA, LA, all in the same game, you could throw them all in there and you could test them all out. And you could have fun like making armies clash and certain things like that. So let's go ahead and jump into what to kind of look out for. So I do have a test game that I wanted to throw together here. So let's hop into it. I keep clearing these out and then forgetting to unclear the rest of these. I think it's testing. Okay, I don't like my funny game names. Okay, so in this case I've got a couple nations that I'm testing, and the thing you want to aim for is expansion by turn 12. That's what I mean by 20 by 12. In this case I think I have 24, and I could show you how this sort of thing works and how I got here by turn 12. Erathsmus is not really known as a great expanding nation. There's quite a few nations I've heard where players will mention, that you can't hit 20 by 12, or you can't do this, you can't do that. I don't believe that. I think with every nation, given that you can curtail certain things to it, can hit 20 by 12. I have not yet played a nation that cannot do that yet. And I've played most nations in expansion testing. There might be a very small handful that I haven't gotten to, like in late age perhaps. That being said, this is something that's pretty healthy we'd want to look for. I want to mention that this game is ran against other human players. That other human player is myself. I am running both of these nations. So when you go to select who's running the nation, don't pick AI. AI is not going to do you any good. Select yourself as the human player to do your expansion test with. If it's just one nation you want to test, set the other one to human and don't bother with it. This map I like to use is called Snaredrin. The Pelawir and Bidden maps work fantastic too if you don't want to download any other maps. I do not recommend generating random maps because it can create havoc for you in trying to create repeatable test scenarios. So in this case, you can see even some of these expansion paths starting out were blocked off. But what you want to look for with expansion is, can you use your scales, your sacreds, or your mages to carry where your nation's going to go in expansion? Or do you need help from your pretender? I don't like to resort to immediately getting help from the pretender. I kind of consider that a last resort. Do you need an expansion titan? Do you need a beast expander or something like that? And that's sort of a last resort. If you find that you're hitting 18 by 12s 17 by 12, that might be an indication that you've got to change your strategy. And if you've tried and exhausted all your strategies, maybe an Expander Titan or an Expander Beast is a better alternative, because hitting any less than 20, it's going to make your multiplayer game not so fun. Actually, I have a few games open we could maybe check out too. So in either case, what you want to look out for is whether your units are recruitable in 1 turn or 2 turns per expansion party. This particular build, I've selected these scales in such a way that they support my mid game, but also my expansion. I picked something like I think my something happened to my Dominion here because I had a higher value. Anyways, though, in this particular build, you have to pick what leader do you want to use your expansion parties with, and your expansion parties should take no more than 2 turns per party. If you hit 1 turn per party, you are going to be golden. You're going to be hitting above 20 by 12. If you're at 2, you'll be hitting right around 20 by 12. You'll be pretty good. In this particular case, I look for what mages can support my early research. In this case, I did a little bit of a research rush, Magic 3, so that I could unlock some early research really quick in here to be able to nail some of my expansion targets. This is a pretty good expansion research goal. In this particular case, I looked at what could I get early in Magic. In here, it was summon imps. I really wanted that. I want imps in this expansion because in this case, Baratos produces blood mages passively, so I could use those to help my expansion. And you might say, well, that's not going to make a difference, 1 cast of summon imps. It really does make the difference between probably 5 provinces in this test. So it's massive, it really is. And then here I notice, okay, so I could get one of these guys. He's a priest level 1, so he'll be able to bless my sacreds. I got these guys. Now normally these guys aren't anything to really take home about, but I've given them a decent bless. Now this bless, and we can see in one of these battles here. This is a relatively aggressive bless. I mean, it's moderate. It's not anything crazy. Magic weapons, defense skill, blood surge. I know a lot of people are like, that's not, you're not stat stacking, you're not resist stacking. I'm testing things out. So I chose this in particular because this bless scales very well into the mid game. But, you know, I'm freaking out about poison resist and all that fun stuff. Anyways, though, early on in 1 turn, I could produce something like this. And that is actually enough to expand with. 4 of these guys with that bless. This guy, blessing units twice, just to make sure he gets the spread on them. And then summoning imps once or twice is enough to expand over most indies. If I could do that every single turn, you're gonna hit something like this. I mean, that's literally what I did this game. And since you'll take very little attrition, you can start piling things together and see some pretty good performance. So I got a few extra elephants in here. This is something that you're seeing come out of this. And here those imps come in, soak up all of that, throw it at the back, ruin everything there. I didn't have the elephants early on in these expansion parties. Well, that was a rough one there. Yeah, this is a pretty typical one. Taking on lizards there. So you can see there's some attrition too. These are pretty min-maxed. Ooh, they got cursed. That's gonna cause some problems. So yeah, you could, and I don't think he had slaves with him. That was this. I get desperate on turn 12, kind of. for my self-testing because I want to see, can I push it to the limit. So you'll see a few of those desperate parties in the end come out. Sometimes I'll throw on a merc if I need some help there. But you can see these expansion parties come out really quick. They can often suffer little to no attrition. Here comes those imps, start crowding things up. Now this is just one example. You can come up with a million different ways to expand, but it's stuff I'm looking out for. I'm looking out for what scales do I need to produce enough of this mix of units so that ideally every one turn I get an expansion party, but I must get an expansion party every 2 turns. That's what will put you in that 20 provinces by turn 12 range. And I've done it in other ways on this nation too, not just these guys. There's plenty of ways to do this here. Things to look out for while expansion testing. In this case, I kind of did a very lazy move. You should try building some forts. I like to hit about 3 additional forts from the capital by turn 12 if possible. So, and the way you do that is you recruit something like an indie commander or a scout to start constructing that. And there are some things to really look out for when you do that. When you expand in a multiplayer game, you don't want to do so very blindly. You want to keep your eye on the income of the provinces and the resources of the provinces. That's extremely important. But when you take over these provinces, you also need to make sure you put province defense where you need it. Like I said, it's a pretty lazy game here. But for me, what's really important is going in here and looking for recruitable indies. Oh, sorry, let me show you that. So statistics, nation overview. I love looking at this. It shows you how many you have. You could count your nations up easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We've got, I think, 24 here. But you could look through here and check all those indies and see if during your expansion you ran over something useful. So let's go to Black Marshes. I see we've got a Jaguar Priest. And hey, that gets us nature. Gets us all this other stuff too, which might be very good for some nations. But we don't really have much of nature as Baratos. So that would be something where during these 12 turns is going to be a target province for a fort and a lab. Might do one or the other depending on what you need, but I do like to fort my indie independent provinces. Could also see what else we've got here. We've got some good sites, maybe some of these. Ooh, that's great. Extra slaves and an air gem. Wow. So maybe this might be something we drop a fort or a lab down. Now let's look at the geography of it. Ooh, that's adjacent to the capital. So I don't think it's going to be worth putting a fort adjacent to the capital because it's pulling resources from here. It's not very high in resources, but it's still pulling it from there. So unsure if I would do it on there. While expanding too, I like to keep the geography in mind. You want to expand in such a way that when you do place those forts, ideally those indies you've got are kind of in a unclustered formation. Like if I had a good site here, this would be good, because then I could fill out these adjacent provinces and recruit indies from there. These aren't so great. Maybe I could get some site searchers. That's another note too. Site searching while you're doing this is very important. I did not in this particular example because I was kind of rushing an idea, but you'll want to start bringing some site searchers out to see what you could get if you're going to plan on testing this anything beyond just early game expansion testing. And I've got another nation here we could pop into. So this is Pythium. I was testing some little bonkers strategy on here with Hydra hatchlings and Palatine's on guard commander because it doesn't count against your squad total. But it's fun to experiment in this kind of stuff to see if you could hit your target goals of 20 by 12. I believe this nation was exactly on 20. If it's a Blood Bond Hydra expansion, whether that's a meme or not is up to you. But it could hit 20 by 12, which means you could be in the multiplayer game to begin with. If you can't hit that, probably wouldn't. I mean, you're gonna have a hard time with the game. It's not gonna be a fun time. So that's a few ideas to keep in mind. Check out that nation overview. See if you've got any good indies that you could recruit to help diversify your magic. Another Jaguar priest there. It's really hard to see with this zoom that I've got. Got another lion tribe here. So maybe some of this could be useful for me. Probably not as late Pythium because I got all the paths I could ever want. Again, I should have up more provinces by this amount of time. At least 3 other forts in, other provinces. I meant to say forts. Should have at least other 3 forts in construction right now, ideally. But why not 30 by 12? In this case, it's 24 by 12, and I think that's kind of a sweet spot. I like 20 to 25. And kind of, just to give you a metric, expect your expansion to be about 5 provinces less than what you're getting here in a typical lobby. Hitting 24, that means I'll probably hit around 19, 20 in a 15 province per player lobby. Maybe to 20 province per player lobby. That's what I've seen throughout my games at least. But why not 30 by 12? Or more than 30, why not go as high as you can? If you go above 25 provinces in a 15 province lobby, you're going to have some diplo problems. By diplo, I mean diplomacy. People are going to coalition you very early, and it's going to be a little difficult unless you've really managed your diplomacy to not come off as just completely egregious. So, and I know there's some people saying, well, you're not responsible for other people's weakness. I get that, but you could be focusing on infrastructure and other things to be able to get your nation to the power level it needs to steamroll those players who aren't expanding anyways. That's my 2 cents on it. But in either case, while you're expanding, always watch out for indies to put those forts down on. Now, let's hop into Pretender creation, just to kind of get an idea of things here. Alright, here. So a few things to watch out for is, what are you shooting for to hit your 20 by 12? And where can you give up a little bit to get more power in some other way? Either on the form of more mage power, or maybe a part of your bless comes online a little later or does better against a matchup. I recommend curtailing your bless for expansion so that if you can use it to at least help you get to that 20 by 12 easily. But going beyond that, being like, oh, I get 2 more provinces by adding, by adding hard skin and going awake and tanking my scales. Don't do that. That's a terrible idea. As long as you're hitting that 20 by 12, I wouldn't worry about it. Now, there's a lot of different chassis you could take to help with this because some nations don't have great expansion options. That being said, I have never expanded with a nation that cannot hit 20 by 12, and I've expanded with almost every nation in the game. So if you're really struggling, these can truly help out. Your expander beasts with either a bless or expander titans. I do love expander titans. They're pretty cool. If you're really struggling, you could supplement your expansion with them. And if you're not hitting 20 by 12 in a single player test, absolutely do that. If you're considering going in a multiplayer game and you're hitting 15 by 12 in your single player test, it's going to be rough. There are some fringe strategies that you can to get around that, but if you're doing those fringe strategies, this video might be a little bit novice for you, I guess. So that being said, there's a few things you could do. One is you could go scales expansion. Scales, easily put, you put in points in here, you could get more troops early to help get those 1 to 2 expansion party per turn requirements you're shooting for. Me personally, I like mage expansion. I like hitting 3 on here and then hitting research targets early to supplement my what might not be extremely powerful parties. And the reason why I like that is because the research scales better into mid-game, in my opinion. And again, you could take blesses to help with your expansion. In this case with Baratos, we'd have to look at what we've got here. We've got some mages, we've got these little dudes at 80 gold. Got these dudes at 140, but they are sacred, they've got some blood. I like to pick my units based on which leader they could travel with easily. Leadership 10. So I gotta, if I want to expand with these guys, and I chose them to expand, I've got to pick units that go into about squad sizes of 10. So I can't spam a bunch of stuff with them. And then I've also got to choose some research to be able to hit something to make Blood 1 useful. Very much curtailed to it. And getting 1 per turn, I've got to choose these scales such that I can produce enough of these guys who are now using a bless per turn to do that. And without that bless I was just toying around with, they couldn't do it. So all those factors tie in together for your expansion parties, and it's really fun to try out. Now, a couple other notes I have on this, because it really is straightforward to test. I recommend trying this yourself, of course. Make it a game for yourself. See, can you hit that 20 by 12? Challenge yourself. And it does sound daunting at first, but it is completely accomplishable.